Hey everybody, Bridgette Dolgoff, Conscious of Economics and Urban Farm Project. And anyway, I am feeling pretty good today. So anyway, recovering pretty fast from that last mass clearing. So that is a good sign. So this is going to be the last video in the thyroid series. And because I teach a lot with individual clients, online and in person, as well as, consult with nutrition and healthcare and a lot of this other stuff. And I do lectures, sometimes locally, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I've realized my channel has kind of lacked from that kind of information. So I'm going to try to put out some more stuff in the future about nutrients and the body, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what those are going to be right now, but today we're going to focus in on structure and brain lateralization. The thyroid, K927 component, blah, blah, blah. So whenever I first start working on somebody, the first place I always look is their feet. And number one, I can tell how serious the brain lateralization is, and we'll talk about brain lateralization, and how far the structure is off, and how unsymmetrical both sides are. And a lot of it goes back to birth trauma. Now, it's what a lot of the work that I do as a traditional osteopath that I'm trained to do is use all these different kinds of methods and modalities, and bring the person back through their entire timeline back to before birth, to fix, structural problems, brain lateralization issues, connect the biological suit back up to the main hard drive, the brain, get the brain functioning as one unified unit, which changes the energy fields. It regulates the body. Brain doesn't have a relationship with parts of the body. It's not going to regenerate them. And in some cases, your heart's regenerated every 6 months, your liver, blah, 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 all these different things up to, a full set of bones. And so when the brain does the regeneration process and goes in and works with the body and they clean it all up, they actually break everything down, all your organs, until there was not even any cell left of that organ, and they totally regenerate it. And so we have to ask ourselves in healthcare why that doesn't happen. Because obviously, if that's what's happening, then how come we can't live indefinitely? Right? Well, because there's a problem with the hard drive, or there's a problem with the DNA replication software, or there's a problem that the hard drive is no longer communicating with the biological suit, usually due to the nervous system, is kind of the telephone communication line. And it's off in some way because the structure is so far off, which means that whatever's not being communicated with, 10 years, 15 years down the road, there's no regeneration going in there. And so you have an organ that is offline for 12 years and it's going to go bad. It's going to degenerate, and then it's going to start breaking itself down. And then what happens is the microbes in that area, instead of cleaning, helping, in the repair process, blah, 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 the regeneration process, actually starts to work like a compost, where they start to break down all the material. So they're actually breaking you down as if your body's dead in that area, right? The degeneration process. And that is what is behind inflammation, is because you're in the breakdown process. Your body's in, the microbes are treating your body as if you're dead and eating it, consuming it, not to regenerate it, but to degenerate it, right? Because that's kind of some of the processes of the microbes. It's what they do. Study compost and microbes, and that is what's going on. And I probably need to do a video at some point on inflammation so that people really understand what that is. And it's hot, you know, you're being broken down by the microbes, and the compost, what happens? Starts to heat up. So there's a heating up, which means there has to be an acid. So you're highly acidic, all kinds of stuff. So that's a whole PhD, or, you know, keeping your pH level and eating a diet that is pH, because most people in the United States are so structurally off and, you know, serious brain lateralization that from birth now, I mean, literally, children have advanced disease because that's how much the trauma, the structure's off in the adult. The adult has a lot of stress because it doesn't feel good, has a pregnancy. The pregnancy enhances all the inflammatory problems. And the mother, you know, ends up being really acid during her pregnancy and having a lot of stress and other kinds of stuff. And then it's going to end up being a stressful birth. And then now the baby, you know, is kind of pushed forward in an advanced way into advanced disease. Normally, you know, if a baby's born and it has structural problems, has some, you know, as its environment, it's developing, you know, starts to get brain lateralization, you know, you still would be like 15 to 20 before you'd start to see, you know, terminal illness. I don't believe in terminal illness, by the way. So, okay. So somebody comes into my practice and I'm going to look at their feet, check that out. And a lot of things can happen. Your legs look different. You got one knee that does something other than the other knee does. And then the knee starts to tear itself apart, degenerate. You know, sometimes people will be like, oh, I tore my meniscus. Well, your meniscus was going downhill anyway, because probably on that leg has always been kind of weird and off. And since your brain isn't making it all the way down to communicate through your spinal column down the nerve pathways into these areas, it's not going to be regenerating your knee, which means that it's not paying attention to your knee at all. So your meniscus is not being regenerated. Your tendons are not being regenerated. You know, your bones are not being regenerated. And if they are, they're being regenerated improperly, right? So when people have knee problems, going to be connected to something else. So you've got this side of your brain, and, you know, you can go to that. There's a great video called Stroke of Insight. I might actually add that. Stroke, as in, you know, you stroked out, of insight. I think by Jill Taylor Bolt on TED.com. She's a PhD brain researcher. Has amazing 14-minute story that'll blow your lid off. And I'll try to add that as a link below. But the brain actually, the only where it connects is here at the base. And the only way that it works with each lobe is that it has neuron transmitters, right, that fire, you know, so it sort of looks like it's connected, right? But not. two separate ones, and so it's an energy field basically that goes back and forth and communicates. So the brains operate completely different and separate. The left one is more reptilian. It's about me. It is in the past and the future. It deals with technical things. Once you learn how to do technical things, like why a lot of the people that I work on that are artists think they're right-brained and they're not, because they've learned something technical, right? How to hold a brush in your hand and move it around is a left brain function. Okay. So it's really very few and far between. And mostly you're going to see kind of right brain lateralization type stuff, mostly in animals and children before they're super traumatized into their left hemisphere. So it's kind of like where the military kind of part of stuff would come out. It would be like the high development of a human weapon, right? Because it would generate the blood going to the extremities and keeping the blood from the torso and the brain, which also does not allow for regeneration. The right brain kind of deals with the here and now. It deals with symbology, symbols. It deals with spontaneous healing, higher levels of understanding, kind of where your spirit connects with, the world's kind of beyond, and what we might, call. So left brain would be self, individual, not collective. And my right brain would be collective. God, collective. Right? And so they're completely the opposite. So when your left brain lateralized, so if this side of your brain deals with this side of your body, this side of your brain deals with this side of your body, and say your right hemisphere has been offline because you got hit in the head, one of your parents yelled and screamed at you, terrified you, you're beaten up by your partner, you survived a serious traumatic event, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. So your right hemisphere just shuts down. And then your face will start to contort. And then by the time that ceasing of that right brain to this whole area, including all the way down to the foot, has gone on for any length of time, you're going to see the degeneration process all the way up the side of the body. People always say to me, yeah, that makes sense because all my problems are on the right side. All my problems are on the left side, right? So you've got one side that's regenerating and one side that's degenerating because, the lateralized part of your brain is working overtime, working with this side of your body or this side. So you may have lots of problems on one side or the other. And remember the last video we talked about here with the massage and stimulation of the K27s, you can tell like how far off. This is the big indicator because this is where also you hold all your retained power to generate, systems. This is your battery operation, positive, negative points. And if it's way far off, you're just not going to have any. So the thing is, you can fall down, throws you off, birth trauma, being in a stomach and a womb during your mother being super stressed out or her environment being super stressed out could cause it. Anything that's happened, whether you've fallen down or you've been through anything that's, caused a stroke or post-traumatic stress moment, hitting your head is that. And I'm listening to a military plane go over. So just want you to know that Western medicine has zero idea. because they only study this, what they're taught. They never go out of the box and go study with lots of other people who are, brilliant in their fields, and in some cases surrendered their medical licenses because they didn't adhere to the to the beliefs anymore, and they were not allowed to follow a course of education and knowledge. And so, they have to surrender their license to actually develop themselves. And it isn't usually until something major happens to them in their life that they realize that they got it all wrong, if they realize. And there's no way that once they know a lot of this information and knowledge, they can stay in the medical system, either as medical research or as a medical doctor. And the system doesn't like them either once they wake up. So, there's always not too long after they kind of have a wake-up period that, the government and the state, the hospitals they work in and the clinics, ask them to resign or totally revoke their medical licenses. And yes, there are people out there, more so, that should have their licenses revoked by the medical system for doing really heinous stuff. Yeah, but those are the ones that don't, because they, play to the party line for the money. Anyway. Okay, so structure, brain lateralization. So, for example, I'll get people who have called me in the past, and they have found me, and they will say things like, well, I've been having some weird issues, blah, 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 blah. And so I went to the doctor, and the doctor told me that, my bladder was really beat up. Okay, well, that means that your hips have been off for a really long time, and they could have been off since you've been born. If your mom had you and you slipped out of her hands while you were wet and fell, especially when the tissues, it takes a long time. If there's new research coming out about the brain, and that the brain isn't really fully developed till the age of 18, you could see how any kind of combat sports, hockey, football, falling off a bike, could be really detrimental, to your spine and your tissues, because, your bones are not really fully developed for a really long time, and nor are your tissues. And that can really throw your body off for the rest of your life. And then you just degenerate, right? And it gets worse and worse. And you're not going to find people out in your world that have an understanding about this. I specialize in something that nobody specializes in, which is structural medicine. And, it's kind of been my life's work because, what is causing the pain? What's causing the pain physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually? Because once you go on the drugs, painkillers, pretty much all of them have, kind of a heroin base, an opiate base. And they block the neuron transmitter in the brain. And, they're giving a lot of people that, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, sometimes lupus, MS, if you have pain, and they'll give you types of drugs that epilepsy, that, basically block the neuron transmitter in the brain, for as long as you take them until you clean yourself up. And so your neurons are not firing to any part of your system or your body anymore. So what does that mean? It means you're in 100% full body degeneration mode. Drinking is like one of the worst things that you can do to lateralization of your brain, and your body functions. And just not to mention that when you drink, you don't go into REM, right? which means that your body doesn't clean itself. So, 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever, you go into REM, your body is doing the mass cleanup, tries to dump your liver and dump your gallbladder and clean up, a huge amount of mess. It's like you have a big party called your day life, and you've got your dishes all over inside, and your floors are all dirty and whatever else. And so when you go into REM, your cleanup fairies come in and make your internal home totally spotless. And there's another component. If you're not taking, if you don't have enough nutrient, for example, if you don't have enough, my brain just went, whoop. If you don't have enough enzymes in your system, right? And enzymes are a control factor as well for pain and joint pain, right? Super important. So is iodine. The two top things, that we talked about in the video 1 about taking also helps with physical pain and joint problems and all these other types of things, like enzymes. And you have to eat a lot of green leafy food in the course of a day to get enough enzymes to hold over, because your body needs enzymes for digestion. It needs enzymes for just like all kinds of things, helping, joint recovery, muscle recovery, inflammation of the body. And so by the time at night, you may not have enough enzymes in your body to actually clean your gallbladder and liver. So you can take enzymes at night, just to make sure that your body is going to go, when it goes into REM, that it'll go up into cleanup. Because it takes a lot of enzymes for the gallbladder and the liver to actually dump at night while you're in REM. So, how long can you go being a toxic mess? I mean, that's why nobody has a gallbladder anymore. And your gallbladder has a lot of really important functions. It just really shocks me how, the system's treated. Like, you can literally, unless the organs have gangrene, if they stop working, you can get them to start back up. Yeah. You don't have to go through the removal process or anything like that. Sometimes it's a structural problem, and that structure, those nerve pathways need to be open so that it can communicate with the brain again, so that it can start the regeneration process and it can rebuild a communication with the, brain hard drive. But there's a lot of things that you have to do. I mean, you've got to have really good nutrient going on in your diet. You have to stay away from alcohol. You have to stay off any type of opiate drugs, period, end of story, and probably most of the antidepressants, And you have to be really careful with what you do with your body. If you do get injured or hurt because you're doing this or doing that, make sure that you're going in and getting some, osteopath work. Like, not the kind where it's surgery or MD, where we're talking like, people touch you, they work on you, they move you through, a healing process with your physical structure and your body. Or some chiropractic, people that have maybe been practicing over 30 years are pretty good. Deep tissue work, you got Rolfing. I mean, you have all kinds of things out there that are going to help you deal with the stress. Sorry, I'm just really itchy. So, yeah, I just want to see. Okay, let's talk about like a spiritual effect and a mental illness. Now, if you end up being, okay, so for example, I had a woman who her son went batshit crazy, right? He was this incredible, beautiful, loving, just squishy boy, and smart and intelligent, and would go into his bedroom and read a book, and was at peace, really calm. And he was playing like football like in 8th grade, and he got crunched really bad. And he was taken to the hospital, and he had a pretty good, concussion. And he healed into completely the opposite of that boy. His personality was completely the opposite. He became paranoid. He wasn't loving anymore. He didn't sleep. He totally just went crazy, his everything spiritually, mentally. Sorry, I don't know why I'm so itchy. Probably like I'm getting microwave radiation pummeling. Oh, anyway, and plus it's cold, so it's like, it's been so cold. I'm sure your skin like dries up as well. So sorry, I'm so itchy. So what happened is that she heard about me and she called me, and I said, yeah, that head injury could have lateralized him in his left hemisphere. And I said, you're lateralized in your left hemisphere. Do you think you're psychic? You think you know things? You're connected to the divine? And basically, it's not. I mean, you may be sort of accurate about stuff. I mean, it's not that hard to read the world. But you're going to be, more in the hallucination, mental illness, and paranoia state. Because the right brain that deals with God and the infinite and the divine is not working. In this boy, it was working before. He would probably be like, 70% right-brained with 30% left brain when he was loving and kind and he was the kid before. But when he came the left brain lateralized guy, he was probably 100% left hemisphere lateralized and 0% right brain, because he couldn't get into the present moment to heal, to gain control over what was going on. And he was in a degeneration process. He was in a mental and emotional and physical and spiritual degeneration process. And it got so bad that she was having to take him to communion every day. She'd have to go pick him up from school to take him to communion so he could confess and try to feel like he's getting blessed and whatever else, because, he knows that there's something severely wrong. He can't put his finger on it. And he's becoming like, schizophrenic almost, right? Not even bipolar, because he didn't have a role. He was just, all right. So anyway, she brought him in, and I started doing a lot of the type of work that I do in traditional osteopath. And, in about 6 sessions, he was totally back to the kid that he was before. We balanced him back out with his hemispheres and the structure of his body and all those kinds of things. So being, structurally unsymmetrical. And then, let's talk about how that looks like on a spiritual level. Like your torus field, everything has a torus field that comes up and out. Now, if you're like one brain lateralized and you've got one side working, you're going to have like a physical kind of a speed wobble. You're going to have a spiritual speed wobble. You're going to have all these kinds of speed wobbles. Probably going to be dizzy. Maybe have ringing in your ears. Maybe have, your eyesight is going kind of funky. Lots of things can happen. You got one, butt cheek way higher than the other side. One leg is a lot stronger than the other one. You may even not even really walk on the other one. Just lots of crazy stuff can happen. And so you're not really connected, So people always talk about this unified field. Well, you have to be a unified being, because we live in a 2D. Physical body, energy body, right? 2 eyes, 2 ears. I mean, for the most part, 2 brains, not 1 brain. So we have to do the work physically as well as emotionally and mentally and spiritually in order to be a unified being, a unified body operating with a unified brain operating in that system, and a unified me and my spirit being in this unified system, working as one system. So if there's anything remotely off over long term, you're going to see like really horrible things happen to your biological machine, because that's what it is, and then you put vaccines in it and all this other stuff, and drugs and whatever else, and it's just not going to run right. And you're going to need a lot of help to try to get it to minimally run so that you can, live and have longevity. Okay, I hope that kind of explains it all. I don't know. Yeah. People that have a little hunchy back, even if they work out, I see this in CrossFit, it's like the only actual, physical thing that I see that people are doing where they have like this hunchback because everything's like frontal workout. So from the front, they look great, but then you like look at them from the side and they've got this hunch, That's a serious problem in structural medicine. That's going to cause some serious physical problems. And it's going to show up in the symptoms of shoulder pain, dislocation in the extremities, hip pain, maybe, the same kind of stuff going on in the legs. And so you have to have like a really nice structure, and it has to have flexibility, and it has to really not have tension. And sometimes, when people overwork out, they become too muscular. They get inflammation, and also it starts to tear apart the structure. And the more scar tissue there is, the less the nerve passages also can communicate with the body. The more tension the body has. So say, for example, you have a lot of tension, in your shoulder over here because maybe you had a little bit of whiplash or whatever, and it was never healed. And this tension is going to continue to develop and continue to develop until it starts to pull everything out and things start to tear out on their own. And there's not going to be any communication with the brain because you got this big old knot and hard tissue back there that keeps the brain being able to regenerate that area because it doesn't have a relationship with it anymore because there's too much tension in there and the nerve is restricted and cut off. So the brain can no longer communicate with that part of the body. Eventually, the brain says, well, I'm just not going to communicate with it anymore because no sense wasting any time. It doesn't respond back to the brain. So, like if you have a surgery and a big cut, that's a serious problem. You're going to need some serious help and serious work because you just cut through all the communication passages to the lower end. So sometimes, waiting to have surgeries as long as possible and looking into alternatives to actually get your brain to wake up back to the area, right? Before you have it cut through and redesigned, right? To hold it back together because you're degenerating. And just because you get that surgery isn't going to stop the degeneration process. I mean, the reason why it's happening is because your knee didn't have a relationship to your brain anymore because, something happened maybe at your neck. And the communication down your spine, down those nerve passages into the leg haven't been working for a long time. So you have to get yourself back connected up to the brain, which is the hard drive. And you have to get the brain back into working in a unified, neuron, neuron firing full blast to each other on both sides. So you have to get back to a whole brain. And then you've got to get yourself back intact into the body, working it as a unified part. So the very conscious part of yourself is really making sure that you're eating right and that you're feeding the body what it needs to eat and you're getting high, dense nutrition. And sometimes you need a supplement program for a while to help you through while you work on your diet, and getting your diet kind of straightened out. So you're putting, high impact nutrient density in your body because things like, say, for example, your B vitamin depleted, serious brain lateralization and serious mental illness. And I read studies that came out of Poland, and they had this period where they had a whole bunch of people just going into a coma for no reason. And then, over time, they realized it was B12 deficiency, right? So you can be so B12 deficient that your brain finally just shuts down completely and doesn't run your physical body systems anymore. Doesn't even check in, doesn't communicate. It's like game over. So when people don't think that nutrition is like, probably the most important, idea and philosophy of you having longevity and a healthy body, they don't believe it. There are studies that show if you're nutritionally deficient. Another thing too is I don't think that people can really comprehend how nutritional deficient they are. But the soil's bad and it's sterile. And it has stuff sprayed on it that's going to cause more brain lateralization, more into the left hemisphere, because, those pesticides go inside the body and start to do some serious damage. They, they tear up and damage the RNA, and they confuse your hormones and all your chemical communication processes. And so they just totally make the whole system like totally misfire. Okay, well, I hope that makes sense. Kind of hard topics to explain to people kind of in a practical way so that they may be able to start to develop kind of some thoughts about how completely and totally different that they've been looking at their health, and add some new ideas in. I mean, obviously, you don't want to go to anyone that the foundation of health and life isn't nutrition, because you're biological. You're an organic biological operating machine. So you need organic biological material going in to keep it going as well. So lots of different areas where you can get structurally off, and you can get brain lateralization and kind of some of the ideas around that. Anyway. All right, Bridgette Lynn, Dog Off Conscious of Economics and Urban Farm Project. Have a great day. Bye.